They saw an easy mark, a 75-year-old black couple, isolated and vulnerable beside a tranquil lake. A perfect storm of prejudice on a quiet afternoon. But they didn't count on who was minutes away, their son, an elite Air Force Pararescueman. The son was a painter, and this Tuesday afternoon was its masterpiece. It draped the world in liquid gold, filtering through the dense canopy of ancient oak trees that stood guard around Willow Creek Lake. Inside the cool, quiet cabin of the 1964 Ford Falcon, Arthur Peterson, at 75, felt the warmth on his weathered hands as they rested on the steering wheel. The wheel was thin and elegant, unlike the chunky, utilitarian grips of modern cars, and the glossy Bakelite felt like a familiar handshake. Beside him, his wife, Elizabeth, hummed softly, a wordless melody that harmonized with the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. They were celebrating 50 years. Half a century. The words felt too grand, too monumental for the simple, profound love that had defined their lives. This drive, this quiet moment stolen from a week of planned family dinners and boisterous grandchildren, was their real celebration. It was a return to the source. They'd had their first real date at this very park, sharing a thermos of lukewarm coffee on a splintered wooden bench and talking until the stars pricked the indigo sky. Now, the bench was gone, replaced by a modern metal one, but the trees were the same, and the feeling, that sense of being at the very center of their own small, perfect universe, remained. Arthur glanced at Elizabeth. Her hair, once a storm cloud of black, was now a soft, elegant silver, pinned meticulously in a bun at the nape of her neck. The lines around her eyes, etched by decades of laughter and a few, deep sorrows, only amplified the light in them. She caught his gaze and her smile, slow and radiant, bloomed. It was the same smile that had steadied him through job losses, illnesses, and the unceasing, low-grade hum of navigating the world in their skin. "You're staring, old man," she murmured, her voice a warm, gentle tease. "Just admiring the view," Arthur retorted, his eyes twinkling. He turned his attention back to the winding park road. He drove the Falcon with a practiced ease, the engine a low, contented purr. The car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a rolling archive of their history. He'd bought it with his first real bonus from the accounting firm where he'd worked for 40 years. He could still feel the phantom ache in his back from polishing its sky-blue finish every Saturday morning. It had carried their children home from the hospital, taken them on family vacations packed with sticky fingers and off-key singing, and now, it was their chariot for these golden, quiet years. "Oh, Arthur, look," Elizabeth pointed towards the water's edge. A family of ducks paddled in a perfect, orderly line behind their mother. "They're so determined. Just like you were, getting me to learn how to dance for the wedding," he chuckled, the memory vivid and warm. He remembered her patient, determined expression as she guided his clumsy feet across their tiny apartment's living room floor. These were the threads of their life, these small, shared memories woven into a tapestry so vast and intricate they could no longer see where one ended and the other began. The comfortable silences, the inside jokes whispered in a crowded room, the instinctive way he reached for her hand when a sad song came on the radio. It wasn't a life of grand adventures, but of profound, unwavering presence. As they rounded a bend, the park's small concession stand came into view, its cheerful red and white striped awning a beacon of simple pleasures. "How about a lemonade?" Arthur suggested. "Maybe a scoop of vanilla ice cream? The kind with the real vanilla bean flecks you like so much." "You read my mind," Elizabeth said, her smile widening. "It feels like a perfect day for it." Arthur signaled, a reflexive, unnecessary gesture on the near-empty park road, and pulled the Falcon into a shaded spot beneath a sprawling oak. He switched off the engine, and for a moment, the only sound was the gentle sigh of the wind through the leaves and the distant laughter of children. He got out and walked around to open Elizabeth's door, a small act of chivalry he'd never abandoned. She took his offered hand, her small, soft fingers lacing through his. They stood for a second, two silhouettes against the shimmering backdrop of the lake, perfectly content, completely unaware that the world, with all its sharp edges and ugly biases, was about to tear a hole in their perfect day. The tranquility shattered not with a bang, but with the crunch of gravel under heavy tires. A police cruiser, a stark black and white predator in this pastoral scene, swung into the parking area. It didn't glide to a stop, it halted, an abrupt, aggressive cessation of movement that kicked up a small plume of dust. The car parked directly behind their Falcon, blocking it in, a deliberate and unmistakable assertion of dominance. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. The distant laughter of children faded. The birdsong paused. 2 officers emerged. The first, the driver, was a man in his late 40s, Officer Carter. He was thick-set, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain. His movements were slow, deliberate, laden with the weariness of someone who had seen too much and expected the worst. The second, his partner, Officer Rollins, was much younger, lean and wiry with a military-style haircut that was sharp and severe. He moved with a restless energy, a coiled spring of arrogance, his eyes sweeping over the scene with a look of bored disdain. They didn't approach Arthur and Elizabeth. They approached the Falcon. Carter walked directly to the rear of the classic car, his gaze fixed on the license plate. Rollins began a slow, predatory circle around the vehicle, his fingers brushing against the perfectly polished sky blue paint, leaving a faint, greasy smudge on the driver's side door. Arthur and Elizabeth, who had been halfway to the concession stand, stopped and turned. A knot of confusion and unease tightened in Arthur's stomach. He felt Elizabeth's grip on his hand grow tighter. "Can we help you, officers?" Arthur called out, his voice steady but laced with a question. He took a half-step forward, placing himself slightly in front of his wife. Carter finally lifted his gaze from the license plate. His eyes were pale, washed-out blue, and they held no warmth, no curiosity, only a flat, procedural emptiness. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" he asked. The "sir" was a hollow formality, stripped of any genuine respect. "Yes, it is," Arthur replied, the knot in his stomach tightening. "We've owned it for a very long time. Is there a problem?" Rollins, having completed his circuit, stopped beside his partner. He smirked, a small, unpleasant twisting of his lips. "That's what we're here to determine," he said, his voice higher pitched than Arthur expected, with a nasal, cutting edge. "The plate's coming back with a flag on our system." "A flag?" The word hung in the warm air, ugly and foreign. "A flag?" "I don't understand," Elizabeth said, her voice wavering slightly. "We just paid the registration last month." Carter ignored her, his attention locked on Arthur. "The system says the plate registered to this vehicle belongs to a 2012 sedan. Not what is this, a museum piece?" The insult to his car, his cherished Falcon, was a small sting, but it was the implication that stung more. The accusation that lay unspoken, but heavily present, in the space between them. "It's a 1964 Ford Falcon," Arthur said, his voice growing tight. He could feel his blood pressure rising, a familiar, unwelcome sensation. "There must be a mistake. A clerical error. It happens." He tried to sound reasonable, accommodating. "Yeah, mistakes happen," Rollins echoed mockingly. He took a step forward, invading their personal space. "Funny how they always happen to certain people. You got proof of ownership? Title? Registration?" "The registration is in the glove compartment," Arthur said, relieved to have a simple solution. "I can get it for you right now." He made a move toward the car door, but Carter put out a hand, a gesture that was both a stop sign and a threat. "Stay where you are," he commanded, his voice dropping an octave. "We'll handle it." The word "handle" felt like a violation. Arthur and Elizabeth stood frozen, forced to watch as Rollins pulled on a pair of black latex gloves with a loud snap and used the keys still in the ignition to unlock the car and the glove compartment. The casual way he began to rummage through the neatly organized papers, the personal receipts, the emergency contact list, it felt like a physical intrusion, a desecration of their private space. The afternoon was no longer golden, a chilling shadow had fallen over them, and they were trapped within it. The search was not a search, it was a dissection. Officer Rollins rifled through the glove compartment with an aggressive impatience, pulling out the neatly folded insurance card and the registration slip Arthur had so carefully placed there. He held it up, squinting at it in the sunlight before passing it to Carter. Carter gave the document a cursory glance. This could be faked, he stated, not to Arthur, but to his partner, as if the elderly couple standing 3 feet away were merely part of the scenery. Easy enough to do these days. A fake registration on a 50-year-old car. Arthur's voice was sharp with disbelief. Officer, that's absurd. My name is on there. Arthur Peterson. The address is correct. You can verify it. We'll verify what we need to verify, Rollins snapped back, his attention now on the rest of the car's interior. He opened the center console, pulling out a handful of hard candies Elizabeth kept for her grandchildren and a book of stamps, letting them fall onto the passenger seat. The scene was beginning to attract attention. A young mother playing with her toddler near the swings paused, her hand shielding her eyes as she stared. 2 teenagers on skateboards slowed, their wheels rattling on the pavement, and pulled out their phones, the dark screens reflecting the tense tableau. An older man in a fishing hat, who had been dozing on a bench, sat up, his brow furrowed with concern. Elizabeth felt a flush of heat creep up her neck. They had been coming to this park for 50 years. It was a place of happy memories, of community. Now, they were a spectacle. A sideshow of suspicion, their dignity being stripped away under the curious, pitying gaze of strangers. Please, she said, her voice trembling now. This is a misunderstanding. We're celebrating our anniversary. We just wanted to get some lemonade. Her plea was met with stony silence. Rollins moved to the dashboard. His eyes landed on a small object resting in the center, a piece of smoothed, dark wood. He picked it up. It was a small, crudely carved bird, its wings half spread as if in mid-flight. It was unadorned, simple, but it shone with the polish of countless touches. Arthur saw him pick it up and a different kind of alarm, cold and sharp, pierced through his anger. Be careful with that, he said, his voice low and urgent. Rollins held it up between his thumb and forefinger. What's this? Some kind of good luck charm? He tossed it lightly in the air and caught it, a gesture of profound disrespect. Elizabeth let out a small, wounded sound, like a gasp of pain. That wooden bird was the last gift their daughter, Sarah, had made for them before the cancer took her 20 years ago. It was her art class project, a flawed, imperfect thing that was, to them, the most precious object in the world. It had sat on that dashboard for 2 decades, a silent, constant companion, a reminder of a love that had been cut short. To see it handled like a piece of refuse, to see it treated as nothing by this arrogant, cruel young man, it was a violation deeper than any search. Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes, hot and blinding. She felt Arthur's arm wrap around her, his body a rigid wall of protective fury. Put it down. Arthur's voice was no longer pleading or reasonable. It was a growl, a low, dangerous command that vibrated with a lifetime of suppressed indignation. Rollins seemed to enjoy the reaction. A cruel smile flickered on his lips. He didn't put it down. Instead, he tossed it onto the cluttered passenger seat, where it landed with a soft, dull clatter amidst the scattered candies. That small sound was an explosion in the quiet park. It was the sound of a line being crossed, a final thread of civility snapping. The teenager with the phone lifted it higher, his thumb pressing the record button. The man in the fishing hat slowly got to his feet and began to walk toward them. The public humiliation was complete, the injustice laid bare for all to see. Arthur and Elizabeth stood there, exposed and shaken, their anniversary, their sanctuary, their most sacred memories, all tainted by the bitter poison of baseless prejudice. Just as the silence stretched, taut and brittle, threatening to snap into something uglier, a new sound cut through the tension. It was the deep, confident rumble of a powerful engine, and a moment later, a sleek, black Ford F-150 pickup truck pulled into the parking area. It moved without the aggression of the police cruiser, parking neatly in an adjacent spot with an air of quiet competence. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with the broad shoulders and lean, powerful build of a career athlete. He was in his late 30s, wearing a simple gray t-shirt that stretched across his chest and a pair of worn blue jeans. His face was a handsome, stronger version of Arthur's, but it was his eyes that commanded attention. They were sharp, intelligent, and at this moment, they were scanning the scene with an intensity that missed nothing. This was Liam Peterson. His flight from his base in Arizona had landed an hour early. His plan was simple: drive to his parents' favorite spot at the lake, surprise them for their 50th anniversary, and take them to the fanciest restaurant in town. A bouquet of 50 yellow roses, Elizabeth's favorite, sat on the passenger seat of his truck. But the scene he drove into was not the one from his imagination. He saw his father, Arthur, standing ramrod straight, his face a mask of fury and fear. He saw his mother, Elizabeth, weeping silently into his father's shoulder. He saw their beloved Falcon, its doors agape, its contents strewn across the front seat. And he saw the two police officers, one radiating a smug belligerence, the other a weary authority. He saw the ring of onlookers, their phones held up like digital torches. The joyous anticipation in Liam's chest evaporated, instantly replaced by a feeling he knew all too well. It was a cold, controlled calm that settled over him in moments of extreme crisis. As an Air Force Pararescueman, a PJ, his entire career was built on stepping into chaos and imposing order, on bringing hope to the most hopeless situations. He was trained to assess, analyze, and act, all within the space of a few heartbeats. He saw the tremor in his mother's hands. He saw the way his father's jaw was clenched to stop it from shaking. He saw the contemptuous smirk on the younger officer's face. He saw the small, carved bird lying discarded on the seat. His mind processed it all, not as a son, but as a rescuer. The mission parameters were clear: secure the principles, de-escalate the threat, and restore order. The threat, he noted with a surge of ice-cold rage, was wearing a badge. He shut his truck door with a solid, definitive thunk. The sound seemed to cut through the air, drawing every eye. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He began to walk towards the group, his posture perfect, his stride measured and purposeful. Each step was planted with an unshakable certainty that seemed to alter the very gravity of the situation. The air, which had been charged with the officer's authority, now began to crackle with his. The onlookers parted for him instinctively. Officer Rollins turned, his smirk faltering slightly as he took in the approaching figure. This was not the kind of person he expected to see at a park on a Tuesday afternoon. Liam stopped a respectful 5 feet from the group. He ignored the officers. His eyes went straight to his parents. "Mom. Dad," he said, his voice calm, clear, and resonant. "You okay?" Elizabeth looked up, and a fresh wave of tears, this time of relief, streamed down her face. Arthur's rigid posture sagged for a fraction of a second as he saw his son. Only then did Liam turn his gaze to the officers. The calm in his eyes had been replaced by something as hard and unyielding as diamond. "I'm Liam Peterson," he said, his voice devoid of any inflection. "These are my parents. Perhaps you can explain to me exactly what is going on here." Officer Carter, the older of the two, was the first to recover. He sized Liam up, noting the man's physical presence and the unnerving stillness in his eyes. This was not the dynamic he was used to. "Sir," he began, the word carrying a grudging weight it hadn't before, "we're conducting an official investigation. This vehicle was flagged in our system." Liam's gaze didn't waver. "Flagged as what? Be specific." "The license plate doesn't match the vehicle description," Rollins interjected, trying to recapture his earlier swagger. "We have reason to believe the vehicle may be stolen." You have reason to believe that this 75-year-old man and his 75-year-old wife stole a car they have owned for 50 years, Liam said, rephrasing the accusation into the stark absurdity it was. He took a small, deliberate step forward. A car, I might add, that is a registered classic and probably worth more to my father than his own house. Is that the working theory you've landed on? His voice was a low, dangerous hum. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that cut through the air and made the officers shift their weight. We're just following procedure, Carter muttered, his eyes darting toward the small crowd, which was now silent, captivated. The teenager's phone was still recording, its red light a tiny, blinking witness. Procedure? Liam's voice sharpened. Tell me, officer, what procedure dictates that you publicly humiliate two senior citizens? What procedure involves tossing their personal belongings around? I'm particularly interested in the procedure that allows your partner to handle a deeply sentimental family heirloom. He gestured toward the wooden bird on the car seat, like it's a piece of trash. I'd love to read that section of your manual. He reached into his back pocket, but instead of a wallet, he pulled out his phone. He held it up, angled to capture the entire scene. For the record, he announced, his voice now projecting to the entire audience, I am Staff Sergeant Liam Peterson, United States Air Force Pararescue. I am now recording this interaction for the official complaint I will be filing with your precinct's Internal Affairs Division and the Civilian Oversight Committee. Now, for that official record, please state your names and badge numbers. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Air Force Pararescue landed in the space between them with the force of a physical blow. It spoke of elite training, of unshakable nerve, of a man who ran toward gunfire and disaster, not away from it. The officers' faces changed. Carter's weary professionalism curdled into outright alarm. Rollins's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a pasty, wide-eyed panic. They were no longer dealing with a scared old man, they were dealing with a highly trained, highly respected member of the U.S. military who was now documenting their every move. Now, look, Carter started, raising his hands in a placating gesture. There's no need for that. This is just a simple misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Liam took another step, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. A misunderstanding is when you get a coffee order wrong. This is harassment. This is intimidation. And given the context, he let his eyes sweep over his parents' black faces and then back to the two white officers. This is a textbook example of racial profiling. And you both know it. He then did something unexpected. He turned his attention from the officers to the small crowd. Everyone here is a witness, he said, his voice clear and educational. You have a right to record police officers in a public space performing their duties. If you ever feel a situation is unjust, your phone is a powerful tool. Document it. Report it. Be an active bystander. Your presence matters. He had transformed the encounter. It was no longer a private humiliation, it was a public lesson. He had deputized the onlookers, empowering them. The man in the fishing hat nodded grimly. The young mother gave a thumbs up. Liam turned back to the defeated officers. Now, he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. You are going to pick up every single item you threw on that seat. You are going to hand my mother her memento and apologize to her. Then you are going to apologize to my father for this disgraceful abuse of your authority. And then you are going to get in your car and leave. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly outmaneuvered, Rollins numbly leaned into the car. He picked up the candies, the book of stamps, and finally, the small wooden bird. He held it out to Elizabeth, his eyes fixed on the ground. Sorry, he mumbled. Carter cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, we apologize for the inconvenience. The words were hollow, meaningless, and everyone knew it. They were the words of men who were sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they did. But Liam had won. He had faced down injustice and, through sheer force of will and moral clarity, had forced it to retreat. The officers, their authority in tatters, retreated to their cruiser without another word. The engine started with a guilty roar, and the car pulled away, leaving a vacuum of silence in its wake. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the spell broke. The man in the fishing hat began to clap, a slow, deliberate applause that was quickly joined by the other onlookers. The sound washed over Arthur and Elizabeth, a warm, supportive wave chasing away the chill of the encounter. Liam immediately went to his parents. He wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them into a tight, protective embrace. Elizabeth buried her face in her son's chest, her body shaking with silent sobs of relief and residual fear. Arthur stood stiffly for a moment, the proud patriarch, before he finally sagged against his son, the strength he'd been projecting for the last hour finally giving way. "Thank you, son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." The owner of the concession stand, a kind-faced woman who had watched the whole thing from her window, came bustling over with 2 tall glasses of freshly squeezed lemonade. "On the house," she said, pressing them into Arthur's and Elizabeth's hands. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Especially not here." The teenager who had filmed the encounter approached them tentatively. "I got the whole thing, sir," he said to Liam. "From the moment they started searching the car. I can send it to you." "I'd appreciate that," Liam said, giving the boy a grateful nod. "You did a good thing today." But even as the community rallied around them, a shadow lingered. Later, as the 3 of them sat on a bench overlooking the water, the retrieved wooden bird resting safely in Elizabeth's lap, the trauma of the event was visible. Arthur's hands, normally so steady, had a fine tremor. Elizabeth kept glancing nervously toward the parking lot, her body flinching at the sound of any passing car. The perfect peace of their sanctuary had been poisoned. This is where the story could end, but the question hangs heavy in the air, a question for all of us: what would have happened if Liam hadn't arrived? Would a clerical error have escalated into an arrest? Would this elderly couple have spent their 50th anniversary in a holding cell, their dignity stripped, their faith in the world shattered? The incident at Willow Creek Lake wasn't just about 2 bad cops. It was a stark reminder that the systems we rely on for protection can also be wielded as weapons, and that unconscious bias and outright prejudice still flow like a toxic current beneath the surface of our society. It highlights the vulnerability of our elders, our neighbors, and anyone who fits a description. But it also shows us the power of one. The power of a son who refused to let his parents be erased. The power of a bystander who chose to record instead of looking away. Liam's stand was exceptional, but it shouldn't have to be. We can all be active bystanders. We can all choose to intervene, to document, to use our voices to speak out against discrimination when we witness it. It starts with awareness, with confronting our own biases, and with demanding accountability from those in power. Thank you for watching all the way through. If this story resonated with you, if you believe these conversations matter, hit that subscribe button and join our community. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments. How can we all be more like Liam? Let's talk about it, and as always, please comment with respect for everyone in this community. We've got a lot to build, together.